Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the sixth episode of Flying with Phoenix speaker series, which is hosted by LTF Ventures at University of Chicago. LTF Venture is a student-run VC organization here at University of Chicago. And Flying with Phoenix is a speaker series that we relaunched recently, where we bring industry leaders and professional service leaders from all kinds of industries to engage with the entrepreneurial community here at University of Chicago and share their insights on business, career, economy, and everything in between. Today, it is our honor to have Alan Fleishhacker to join us for the next hour. So welcome, Alan.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here and to talk with you all. I'm really pleased. And by the way, if any of you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I will accept your invitation because I'd love to be a mentor for you going forward and not just speak with you at this 1 hour.
Thank you so much for that generous offer, Alan. I guess before we get started and jump right into all those wonderful questions our audience have submitted, and I encourage you to submit more questions using the Q&A functions at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I would like to give you a brief introduction of Alan's background as to provide some context for our conversation today. So Alan serves as a co-managing partner of Arnold and Porter. She leads the firm's investment management practice group. Her practice focuses on investment management, including the formation, compliance, and transactional matters of real estate funds, hedge funds, venture funds, private equity funds, and impact investment funds. She also represents wealth advisory firms, family offices, and financial institutions on legal, compliance, and transactional matters associated with their investment management and related operations. Alan holds a BA, an MBA, and a JD, all from the University of California, Berkeley. So again, welcome, Alan.
Thank you so much.
So I guess the first question, Alan, is that you graduated from UC Berkeley in 1989 with a bachelor degree in history. Did you at that time decide that you want to go to law school immediately and to become a lawyer, hopefully? Or did you work for a few years before you made that decision? And what ultimately inspired you to become a lawyer at that time?
Well, thank you for asking. So unlike the University of Chicago with your amazing career services and programs, when I graduated from UC Berkeley back in 1989, there was no such thing. There was a room you went into, and there was literally like little paper 3x5 cards that were pinned to thumbtacked to a wall, and they listed job opportunities, and there was no organization of them. You just, some of the jobs might be in science and some might be in, book editing, and you just had to look through all of them and see if you could find something and then start making phone calls or sending resumes. So you all are so lucky to have the resources that you do. But when I graduated, I was thinking I might want to go to graduate school in history, because I really liked the intellectual aspects of it and very interested in history. But before I did that, I wanted to at least get some work experience. And honestly, I went to that job board and I looked at all the jobs, and the only one that I felt really qualified for was a job at a law firm working as a paralegal. So I applied to that and discovered when I was working there how much I actually enjoyed the law. And what finally kind of made me decide to apply to law school was I liked the flexibility that I thought a career in law would give me. I was a little bit worried that if I went into academia, I wouldn't have the flexibility to choose where I wanted to live, for example. There just wouldn't be as much choice. And since I was equally interested in both, I decided to go down the law route, which I have never, ever regretted.
Right. That sounds like a great reason for going to law. The flexibility it provides, especially with those big, large international law firm with offices everywhere, right? You can almost anywhere you want on that.
Almost.
Almost.
Yes.
So you did attend Berkeley Law from 92 to 96. And unlike most law students, you not only took on a JD degree, at the same time you picked up an MBA degree from Berkeley. Do you think that decision to pursue a JD MBA gives you any advantage early in your career, or perhaps had in any form or shape determined or helped determining your practice or area of focus?
Well, so the decision to do the JD MBA is a really kind of a great example of listening to mentors. So when I was working at the law firm, I was working primarily with a partner that did tax appeals. And so a lot of the work I did was quantitative. And I never thought of myself as a person who would enjoy sitting down all day long and doing math. Believe me, that was the last thing I expected. But it turned out I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed the business aspect of law because if you're interested in business, law is actually a great career because you're exposed to so many different kinds of businesses, so many different business people. And I discovered that I really loved that. And so my mentor, who I worked for doing the tax appeals, suggested I consider doing a JD MBA. And I'd never even ever thought of it. And I'd never taken, unlike all of you, I had never taken calculus. So I did a summer program and I took calculus and I took a bunch of economics classes, which also, unlike you, since you're at University of Chicago, you've all had wonderful economics. I did all that stuff just in order to be able to apply to the business school. And I had to take what's the test you take? The GMAT to take that. And I just thought I'll just apply and I'll see if I get in. And if I don't, that's fine. And if I do, that's great. And it was a great decision. Having the dual degree opened up so many opportunities for me. And even though I decided ultimately to pursue law, it gave me, I guess I would say, in the eye of some clients, it gave me an added credential that they found valuable, a little bit more cachet, a little more gravitas. And I think it really enabled me from a very sort of early point in my legal career to be taken seriously by business people.
Right. That's great to hear. It's interesting to hear. Um, the reason that you pursue the JD MBA is because of mentorship and mentors' advice. Um, so I guess I have a follow-up question on that. Is a lot of JD MBA holders out there decided to go into fields like public service and politics. Even if you think about Mitt Romney, I think he holds a JD MBA. Have you have any similar plans in your life where with JD MBA, like maybe I should run for office one day?
No, I know that you're very interested in politics, so I hate to admit that that thought never occurred to me. I don't think I ever saw myself that way. Maybe if I were younger, I would consider it. But in all seriousness, I do think one of the wonderful things about having chosen this path of career in law and business is it has given me the opportunity to serve the community in ways that I might not have been able to otherwise because I've served on a number of boards of directors. I have the skills to be able to really do that sort of thing in a way that people who don't have my educational and work experience don't. And then as lawyers, we have the opportunity to do so much pro bono work, which is pro bono, for the good. So it's work that law firms do for clients that can't afford to pay us. And so I've had the opportunity to just do amazing work that benefits the public for free, for my entire career. And this, my law firm in particular, is a leader in pro bono. We're very dedicated to it. And the breadth of work we've been able to do is just, it's truly incredible. Even during the pandemic, I got really involved at the beginning of the pandemic with restaurant owners, which I know is dear to your heart, David, helping restaurant owners do everything that they could to get, the PPP loans and other assistance so that they could keep their restaurants in business at that early period when everything was shutting down. And helping, we did a huge project helping restaurant workers get unemployment during that period as well. And it just feels really good to have the skills to be able to help people with things like that.
You touch upon pro bono work, right, which is a form of public service, of course. I guess just a quick question is, I'm curious about it, is when you do pro bono work, is it a team consists of from partner to associate, from senior members of a law firm to junior member, that they all do the same pro bono work project together, or is this more like a dispersed, each member take on their own pro bono project kind of thing? I guess it's more centralized where the firm organizes pro bono work, or is it more individual pro bono work based on availability of individual preferences and time?
It's really both. So we have some really big projects that we're doing, some really big impact litigation, big projects, even like the PPP project that I told you about, where we were helping restaurants get these loans. We were working with the James Beard Foundation, and we had a team of probably 30 or 40 lawyers at our firm who were on this team. And so the restaurants would basically say, we need help, and then we would just divide them up. And so I think I had like 10 restaurants, and we all just sort of took some as our time allowed. And so we had big project, big litigation. We're doing a lot of work with Black Lives Matter related to a lot of the incidents that happened at protests in the last years of the Trump administration. And so those involve a lot of lawyers. But then people have the opportunity, if there's something that interests somebody and they want to do pro bono related to that, as long as they get permission, they can do whatever pro bono they want. So something I do is I provide pro bono legal services to an organization that supports people with Parkinson's disease. That's sort of near and dear to my heart because my mother has Parkinson's. And so it's sort of a way that I can support her community. And that was something I just initiated on my own.
I see. Well, it's wonderful to hear that you can be both doing corporate pro bono work and also on an individual basis. Thank you for that.
Yes.
So throughout your career, Alan, you worked at 3 different law firms before. I mean, I guess Arnold and Porter is your third one, and you rose through the rank from associate to partner, practice leader, office leader, and ultimately, last year you became co-managing partner of Arnold and Porter. Throughout this, I guess, 2 decades and more long career, what was your proudest accomplishment? And with that, what was the greatest challenge?
Okay, so I'm going to tell a short story, and hopefully it will be interesting to people, and so you'll have to indulge me. But the moral of the story, which I'm going to tell you before I tell you the story, is that you never know what path your life is going to take. And I really encourage all of you not to cling too hard to any particular path that you have in mind, because being open to opportunity and being flexible about how you live your life and spend your days, I think will ultimately lead to a much richer life than you ever would have expected. And I don't necessarily mean richer in terms of money. I mean richer in the fullest meaning of that word. But so my story is enriched. So my story is that, I did this JD MBA. I was very, very, very ambitious. I was top of my class in both the not the very top, but, towards the top of my class in both the law school and the business school. I was the managing editor of the Law Review. I was very, very ambitious. And my idea was, and I think that a lot of you will be able to relate to this given sort of the venture nature of what you all are interested in, is my idea was I was going to go to a law firm. I was going to practice corporate law at a law firm for, let's say, 2 or 3 years, get some sort of really good training and experience. And then I was going to go to a company in the Silicon Valley. And this was during a really boom time in the Valley where lots of companies were sort of on the threshold of IPOs. And there was a lot of opportunity to really get in sort of at an early time and make a ton of money. And so my whole thought was, I'm going to pick the right company. I'm going to go there. I'm going to get stock options. I'm going to work there through their IPO. And then I'm going to be like 28 years old and able to retire. And it was very, very, and I know how this sounds, and it sounds very like greedy and pecuniary, but I'm being honest, that was sort of my plan. And so I ticked all the boxes, right? Graduated from a good law school, got an MBA, editor of the Law Review, went to a really prestigious law firm. But then I decided, I think I'm going to start a family. So I got pregnant, like probably within like 2 weeks of starting at the law firm. And so I was there for 9 months. And then I had our first child, my daughter. And I fully expected I'll go on my maternity leave and then I'll hire, a nanny, a full-time nanny, and I'll go back to work and I'll continue apace on this plan that I've always had. But what ended up happening was that I didn't want to leave this adorable little baby in my arms. I couldn't stand the thought of going back to work. And I decided I was lucky enough to be in this position that I could do this. I just decided, I think I'm not going to go back. I'm going to stop working and I'm going to be a staying at home mom. And so that's what I did. And I stayed at home for a couple of years and a few years. And during that time, I did a little bit of, I tried to like help some entrepreneurs with business plans. Like I didn't even charge them. It was more just to keep my mind active. And I did some pro bono work for a judge in the foster care system, trying to help kids get through the foster care system more quickly, or the legal part of the foster care system more quickly, so they could get permanent homes. And I had my son Jonah, who's a student now at University of Chicago, and I was able to be at home with him when he was a baby. And then someone reached out to me from my second law firm, and they were looking for someone to work part-time. It was at a time when part-time lawyering was very unusual. And they'd heard about me from some people at my first law firm, and were wondering if I would just interview with them. And so I did. I was open to the opportunity, and I thought I'll just interview with them. And if I don't want to do it, I don't have to do it. And if they don't want me, they don't have to take me, but I'll see what this is about. So I interviewed with them, and then I got really excited about the job they were offering me and the ability to work part-time and to be home with my two kids, but also sort of restart my legal career. And so after 3 years away, I went back part-time at this law firm. And it was wonderful. And I was able to be home with my kids in the afternoons and work in the mornings and start my career. And there was a lot I gave up, from doing that, but I didn't regret it at all. And this was at a time when, it wasn't like it is now, where there was a lot of programs for mothers and women and other parents, for lawyers. None of that existed. And I just kind of did my thing, tried to be the best lawyer I could be and the best mom I could be. And I was really lucky. They decided without me even ever asking or trying. I made partner early, before I should have, even if I'd been full time. Um, I think I was just so happy and thrived and enjoyed it so much. And then actually that law firm merged with another law firm. So I've really only technically been at two law firms. Um, and my career just sort of took off from there. But it was not the path I ever expected to take. I never in a million years thought I never thought I'd make partner at the law firm. I in a million years never thought I'd be co-managing partner of an international law firm. I thought I would work at a company and do an IPO. But has been such a wonderful career. I'm so grateful that, to have just taken chances and done things that weren't exactly in the plan. So I hope that all of you will be open to opportunity and really just seeing where the world takes you instead of trying to force a path.
Right. Thank you so much for that story, and then sharing about your motherhood and your career and how they interact. And it's just awesome. Great to hear. And Alan, you are one of the few women who leads a prestigious international law firm, a white shoe firm, what they call them, in the US. So what was it like to be a woman in law at the beginning of your career when you give birth to the first child, and in the 90s? And how is it compared to what it is now today? I think you mentioned some programs, but are there any more like, paradigm shifts between how women are like in law in the past and today? And what remains the largest challenge?
There have been paradigm shifts, multiple, and including one that I believe that we're going through right now. So I can say that when I got pregnant with my daughter, who was born in 1997, and again with Jonah, who was at University of Chicago in 2000, there were very few, at least at law firms at that time, there were very few programs, part-time programs, family leave programs, support programs, affinity groups for, and at this time it really was about mothers. And there wasn't a place to, and I'm sorry to say this in front of my son, but there wasn't a place to like pump your milk. There wasn't a room for that. You had to do that in the bathroom. And it was a time when the industry was still figuring out how to be inclusive and equal and encourage the diversity of gender and parenthood that now is so. Now, I mean, fast forward to today, and there are programs not just for mothers but for fathers and for primary caregivers and secondary caregivers. And there are support groups, and there are places to pump your milk, and there are all kinds of leave programs, and there's just so much support for people who seek to both have a family and have a professional career. And that's not just true in the law, that's true in every pretty much every industry at this point, and it's wonderful. And the other paradigm shift that's happening now, and you all, when you graduate, I think are going to be real beneficiaries of it, is this whole movement towards wellness
Mm.
and thinking about, the emotional and psychological and physical health of workers, and really trying to take care of all of that. So I used to try to hide the fact in some ways that I was a working mom. So if really what I was doing was like leaving work early to go, pick up Jonah from a piano lesson, or go to my daughter's ballet class or something, I would tell a client, "Oh, I have to go to a meeting." I wouldn't be honest about what I was really doing because I felt like there was a stigma, but that has really changed, and it's especially changing now where people respect and honor that everybody has a life outside of their job. And you have to be committed to your job, and you have to take it really seriously, and there are going to be times when you wish that you were, going for a hike, and instead you're sitting there crunching through, a spreadsheet or something. But there's an expectation more and more now that people will be able to have a balance. And I'm really glad, and I'm really happy for all of you that you'll be graduating at a time when the pandemic is really what really, I think, focused everyone's attention on that.
Absolutely. There's a whole discussion around what is the best way to get people working, but at the same time maintain their mental and physical well-being, right? Part of that discussion is uh, whether or not we should allow remote working, and if so, um, how much time should be spent in the office for vis-a-vis at home. At your law firm, is there any like such flexibility around remote working? I mean, it's so big. I guess COVID hits different office perhaps differently, but is it like a uniform policy where people can kind of pick the number of days they work from home, or is it more uniform throughout the firm?
So you're asking the right person, because in my role as co-managing partner, one of the projects that I led and helped lead was thinking about what our remote work policy would be coming out of the pandemic. And we really had a very thorough process. We met with every kind of stakeholder at the firm. So we met with all the partners, we met with all the associates, we met with all of the professional staff and different categories of professional staff to really understand what would be appealing to them in a, sort of hybrid work model, what would work for everybody, what would allow us to continue to serve our clients but still have some flexibility. And we came up with a program where virtually everyone in the firm, once we come back to a full-time environment, which we haven't yet, we're still in a remote working environment because of Omicron, but once we come back, the idea will be that almost everybody will have the ability to work 50% of the time in the office and 50% of the time from their homes. And there's some exceptions. There's some people that, like receptionists, for example, that their job entails them having to be in the office all the time. And then there are some jobs that really never need to be in the office. And so they have the option to be 100% at home. But the vast, probably 85, 90%, maybe even more, would be on this 50-50. And people seem really, really excited about it and really happy about it. We actually won an award from the Diversity and Flexibility Alliance for our program. And, we haven't yet had the chance to experiment with it because we thought we would. We thought we'd be back in, October, but hopefully we'll be able to start to, actually experience it and then make some tweaks to the program soon.
Congratulations and thank you for your leadership on that. And at a law firm of this level, one move from one law firm, I'm sure will cause other law firm to copy, and at the end of the day, will transform the industry on their way of working. Um,
Yeah, well, thank you. Each law firm is definitely making their own decisions. It will be really interesting to see if there becomes sort of an industry standard.
Absolutely. So you mentioned also just now, bio, where you made partner very early in your career, definitely very successful as an associate to make that jump that quickly. I guess just for the people in our audience who might be interested in being a lawyer, or maybe just enter into professional service, either as a banker or consultant, what would be like some of the key skills or attribute that you have observed from both your own career and also your employees' career that characterize the most successful young associate or analysts?
I kind of feel like anyone who goes to University of Chicago probably already has these attributes, but obviously the first one is just the ability, the intellectual ability to do the work. And you all have that in spades. That's not even a question. And then after that, so you can be the smartest person in the world, but if you don't have good emotional intelligence, you're probably not going to be as successful. And so what I found is the associates who are the most successful are really smart and really driven, but also they have good EQ. So as an example, if a client has a question, and let's just say the client is a CEO of a big company, and you can imagine that they barely have any time to do anything, and they have a simple question, what are the legal ramifications if our company does X? If you write a 30-page memo, their heads are going to explode. They're not going to read it. It's not going to be helpful to them. And so understanding, okay, if I were the CEO of a major corporation, what would be like the takeaway that I need to know? And that would be the backup that I need to look at if I want more, but I don't have to look at it. And that's just one tiny example of sort of knowing your audience and having emotional intelligence, but being able to read a room, being able to just intuitively sort of understand what people need. I think those are really, really important qualities that people actually can develop. And I think one of the ways to develop them when you're first starting out in your career is to spend time observing and learning sort of the culture of the place where you're working, the personalities of where you're working, and then you will be super valuable. And then I guess the two other things I would say are sort of, I really appreciate associates who are proactive, who aren't scared of me. And I think some people are scared of sort of anyone who's sort of their superior or whatever in the hierarchy. But I actually really appreciate it when people question me, not in a confrontational way, but like, are you sure about that? Because here are some facts you might not be aware of, and I just want to make sure you're aware of them before you make this decision. And I might say, yeah, I'm aware of it, and I still want to do this. Or I might say, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I hadn't thought about that. I really appreciate you kind of bringing this to my attention. So, and then the last one is sort of grit. People who can sort of roll with the punches, I think, are generally the most successful. And I think all of you, unfortunately, have developed grit because you've been students during the biggest pandemic of all of our lifetimes, and you really had to roll with the punches. So you got grit, that check.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Alan. I guess now I think it's time that we switch gear a little bit and talk about something that is core to our practice, which is fund management, investment management, and that sort of things. I guess before we get into anything, for the benefit of our audience today, could you just briefly describe the role that lawyers and law firms play in investment management, and especially in, I guess, the life cycle for fund, if you look at it that way, where does lawyer get involved and what are the roles they're playing?
All right, well, so let's just use the example of a venture capital fund, since I understand that's really what your organization is primarily interested in. So a venture capital fund would be a pooled investment vehicle where different investors commit a certain amount of capital, say like each of them commit $10 million or something, into a pool of capital that the sponsor will then use to invest in venture companies. So some venture funds might be angel funds that are investing in a very, very early stage of a venture company. Other venture funds might be, like the Series C or the Series D, a little bit more, sophisticated emerging companies. But so you're a sponsor, you're forming a venture capital fund, and you need legal assistance in drafting all of the offering documents. So the documents that are going to go to these investors. So I'm just going to make this up. Let's say you're trying to raise $500 million. And the minimum investment, let's just say, is $10 million. So you all do the math. You're all good at math. If everyone sort of more or less invests that amount, you're going to need a whole bunch of investors. And so what you're going to go out do is you're going to go out, you're going to have to market your fund, and you're going to need materials for that. You're going to need a limited partnership agreement for the fund. You're going to need a private placement memorandum that describes everything about the sort of the investment thesis of the fund, the experience of the professionals at the fund. It's going to have risk disclosures. It's going to have a tax discussion. There's a whole bunch of stuff that will go in that memorandum. You need to have, there's a bunch of other documents that I won't go into, but the lawyers help you with all that. They help you with the regulatory aspects. Do you need to register with the Securities and Exchange Commission as an investment advisor? Do you need to, what exemptions can you rely on so that you don't have to do like a public offering, like an IPO, all that sort of thing. And the lawyer helps you through all of that. And it's a, it can be a 6-month to a, multi-year process that the lawyer is helping you through. And then you're going to need law firm once you get that pool of capital together. So now you have your $500 million that you're going to invest in these emerging companies. You're going to need a lot of legal help in all of the transactions with, buying shares of those emerging companies, getting seats on the board, all that stuff, right? You're going to need legal help with that as well. So it's our job. I personally don't do the second piece. I don't help with the actual investment into the venture fund. I have colleagues who do that. I do the fund formation and the regulatory and then hand it off to somebody who does the transactional kind of corporate part of it.
Great. Thank you for that recap of your industry and your practice. You mentioned that a lot of the time you were drafting documents for the limited partnership formation. I guess also for the benefits of audience today, why is limited partnership such a predominant structure in the fund industry today? We don't see many other forms of organization. We don't see a lot of private investment company compared to the number of limited partnership out there. What kind of benefits does this structure have over just ordinary private companies?
Right. So the options would be you could have a corporation, you could have a partnership,
Right.
or you could have a limited liability company. Those would be the options. And nobody wants to have their fund, well, okay, it actually is much more complicated than this, because if you have tax exempt investors or non-US investors, you might actually want your fund to be a corporation. So I'm going to ignore that for a minute.
Okay.
And just assume that the fund we're talking about only has US taxable investors. You would not want the form of your fund to be a corporation because that's a double taxed entity. So the corporation would have to pay tax, and then when the corporation made a distribution to the investors, they would have to pay tax. So that would not be tax efficient. Again, if you have nonprofits or non-US investors, sometimes the tax drag is worth it for other reasons. So those sometimes will be formed as corporations, usually not in the US. Often there's like an offshore blocker for corporation, we call them blockers, but there'll be an offshore corporation that does that. But so corporation would be a terrible choice because there's a tax issue with that. And then you have a partnership or a limited liability company. Both don't have the double tax problem. So it could be either, but the market has just sort of landed on partnerships. That's what investors understand and expect. That's what everybody's offering documents are sort of drafted to be. And it's just become sort of market standard. There's no reason funds could just as easily be limited liability companies. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's just where the market landed.
So it's very much just inertia that.
It is. It just because also it doesn't matter. Either
Right.
one is fine. They're the same.
Okay. So as you mentioned, right, in limited liability company, there will be the LPs who provide the money for investment, and then you have the general partners who are the ones that normally the fund managers who would also hold some share, but will be managing the direction of the fund. Throughout your career, do you see evolution in the governance of a fund? Does the power dynamics between LP and GPs change in the past 2 decades that you're in when you are working in this industry?
Just like everything else, everything has cycles, right? So when sponsors are able to raise their fund relatively easily, when there's a lot of money out there in the economy to invest, then sponsors have a lot of leverage in the way they draft their documents. And when the economy is tighter and people aren't making investments in private funds, fund sponsors have less leverage and are willing to concede a lot more terms, both governance terms and economic terms. So, so there's always that cycle. Right now, there's a lot of money in the economy that's trying to invest. And so fund sponsors have potentially relatively more leverage than they might otherwise. But there has been a trend over, I'd say, the last decade or so, and in some ways led by an organization called ILPA, which is the Institutional Limited Partner Association, which is basically like big institutions that are investors in these private funds. They've put together a series of principles and desired terms and governance requirements that they haven't become market standard, but they've sort of nudged the market in a certain direction. And so the governance, and also because of SEC regulation, which has really increased over, say, the past 15 years, there is a lot more, I think, formal governance in fund offering documents than there was before.
Gotcha. That's a great, interesting trend to hear. So you mentioned right initially you want to be perhaps a corporate lawyer, do some IPOs, and later on you joined and you specialize in fund. I guess now there's some kind of a convergence where we have this new vehicle called SPAC, where you help them a fund and you get listed first, and then you find a target to acquire. I think that's only a recent phenomenon in the past year or two. Has AMP been involved in any of that kind of a fund structuring? And what's your personal view on the future of SPAC vis-a-vis traditional, IPOs?
So our firm has worked on SPACs, and they're really interesting. And it's interesting how a new model like that can sort of take hold and become so popular. It's hard to say, what the future of SPACs is. There's likely to be more regulation, and that may or may not chill the interest in them, but they're serving a function, and they, at least right now, are still quite a popular vehicle. So this is sort of a wait and see kind of thing.
Okay, so we will not rush to our conclusion whether it's going to be short-lived or we'll give it a
Right.
few more years.
Exactly.
So you work with so many, I guess, successful VCPE hedge fund managers in these years. What do you see are a important characteristic that a successful fund or fund manager possess, just based on your experience with the industry? We kind of didn't ask this question with our fund manager guest speaker in the past, because they always kind of just they are partial to their own fund and their own philosophy. But from your third party observer perspective, what do you think characterize the most successful fund managers?
It's so interesting that you say that, because we do have a kind of a different vantage point, because we meet so many fund managers, and really running the gamut from first time fund managers to, very, very large, sophisticated, experienced track record, a strong track record. And I used to think, especially when I used to do a lot more sort of emerging manager work, I used to feel like, okay, after meeting with them for an hour, I know whether or not they're going to be successful. I'm not so sure anymore. I feel like that was probably an overgeneralization, but what I kind of used to observe was that if someone came to our office and they were starting a fund and they thought that they already knew everything and that they had it all figured out, and there was only one way to do this and they were going to do it their way, and they weren't open to sort of listening to our experienced advice and sort of guidance from a legal side, but that also, of course, overlaps with what business decisions they're making, I would just think to myself, I don't think this fund is going to make it, because founders need to be able to listen to other people. And if they're so sure that they know everything and they're so sure that they're right and they can't listen to anyone else, I personally think they're doomed to failure. And in my experience, that is actually what happened, is that those people their funds only lasted for a little while. But I'm sure there's people who have that characteristic who rule the world, so I'm not saying it's 100% of the time, but I really believe that in any any business, any leadership, anything you're doing, having the humility to listen to other people will make everything you're doing stronger.
Right. That's great advice for anyone here. Uh, if we just flip that question that we just asked, when let's say a manager is raising a fund for the first time, what are some of the things that LPs would look at? Before they commit their capital, is it mostly industry experience? Is it expertise in a certain field, biotech, tech, finance, or is it dynamics of the management team? What is the most decisive factor for LPs to consider before they commit their capital in, let's say, a brand new VC or PE fund?
I mean, I will say it's a really tough road for a first-time fund manager because they don't have a track record.
Right.
And investors really want to see that track record. So if you've even had one fund already, you're on fund two, right? You can say, okay, our IRR was X, our multiple on invested capital was Y. Like you have a track record that you can point to. And so investors have some confidence. You always say, lawyers always say, past performance is no guarantee of future returns, right? Like you can't, it's not a guarantee just because your last fund did really well doesn't mean your next fund will. But but let's put it this way, if your last fund didn't do well, investors are going to be very concerned about investing with you on your second fund. So first time managers, typically the most successful ones, were already working at a firm, an investment management firm, a fund sponsor firm, and they worked as, let's say they worked as part of the, opportunities group, or they worked as a certain part of a group, and now they've sort of spun off. And so even though they don't have a fund track record, they have a history, and there's investors who know them, who personally know them, who worked with them at their other firm, who are willing to kind of go in and sort of seed that initial enterprise with them, that initial fund. But it's a tough road because investors really, they care about the team. They want to see a really strong team because they're betting on the people, and they want to see a track record. So if you don't have the track record, you're going to have to really convince them with the team.
Absolutely. I was reading the other day that I think Steven Schwartzman's bio, what it takes, and when he was already like a partner at Lehman when he was 30 something, and he tried to raise his first fund. It's so incredibly difficult just because
Exactly.
record.
Yep.
But he did well, I guess.
Yeah, it worked out for him.
It worked out for him.
And now Beyonce sings at his birthday party or whatever. So yeah.
If we can just turn our attention to a couple of business trend questions that our audience ask. One of them, of course, in today's day and age is about crypto. According to a report from PwC last year, the total AUM of crypto hedge fund globally have reached 5 billion by the end of 2021, and about 1/3 of those funds are domiciled here in the US. In your experience, what are some legal and regulatory challenges that arise from this new herd of crypto funds? Do they carry greater risks? And most important of all, the question, do you own any cryptos yourself?
I wish that, unlike my son, I did not invest in whatever it's called, Dogecoin, 10 years ago, which I wish I had. But that's a story that he can tell you about his own investment. It's interesting with crypto. So I would say about 5 years ago, I started getting calls from potential clients that were raising crypto funds. And I try not to turn away potential clients, but I actually turned away every single one of them, one at a time, because in each case, they were very inexperienced. I was very worried that they just didn't have the skills. They might have been the smartest crypto investors you've ever met in your life, but I was very, very worried that they didn't have the skills to run a fund in a sort of business-like and responsible way. And I just didn't want to be involved. The market has since then evolved incredibly, and it's no longer I don't want to disparage any of you, but it's no longer, the 22-year-old who just graduated from college and is trying to raise, 200 million to invest in crypto. And it's much more of a sophisticated industry now. and one that we're much more comfortable getting involved with. There are a lot of legal challenges. It's still, the regulators, the government and the regulators and old people like me don't really understand crypto. We don't really understand the blockchain. It all feels like magic, kind of like fake money to us, and we're trying to get our arms around it. And so the regulators are trying to figure it out. They can't decide, is crypto a security? Is it not a security? Is it a commodity? And while all of that is in flux, anybody that's trying to go into the crypto business is going to have to deal with regulatory and legal uncertainty, which is where lawyers can really help. But, even we, like, where the law is uncertain, there's only so much we can do. But having said all that, it's really fascinating area. And we have a lot of people, we're a Washington, D.C. based law firm. So we have a lot of people in our policy group who are deeply, deeply interested and experienced in sort of crypto from a regulatory and public policy point of view. And it's something that I think we're interested in really building on. And we have also this huge financial services group that also has a lot of expertise in sort of the bank regulatory aspects of all this. So I think we're going to start getting more and more involved in crypto, but it's definitely an industry that's still very, very much evolving.
Would you recommend us putting any of our tuition money into Dogecoin?
So like I always say to my lawyers, I cannot give you investment advice.
Great. Thank you for that. But yeah, I mean, jokes aside, that's actually fascinating to hear that you actually came across many crypto funds, wannabes or managers many years ago before the general public actually was so fascinated by it. So maybe one of the investment strategies to be friend with a lawyer and always ask them what kind of new funds they are working or coming to them.
There you go. Yeah. What are the trends? Yes.
Exactly.
Yep.
Another trend in the fund industry is pioneered by Sequoia Capital. So they recently restructured their funds to allow unlimited fund durations, right? Because in the past, normally it's 10 years where LPs commit their capital, they invest, they exit, and they return the capital back to the investors through different kinds of exit opportunities, IPOs, acquisitions, and mergers, and then they return that capital in 10 years and close that fund and then raise a new one. But now it becomes a huge unlimited duration fund where they can keep their basically money in the public company for as long as possible. Their justification is that they can hold those good companies longer and they can profit more that way for their investor. Do you think that because of this new change by industry leader, the line between private and public market funds are being blurred? And what do you think of in general just this new unlimited duration investment vehicle will do to the fund industry?
So I think of it more as kind of a hybrid model. So there's sort of, in terms of private funds, there's sort of two categories. There's hedge funds, and then there's private equity funds. And private equity funds includes venture funds and real estate funds as well. And with a hedge fund, a person, puts in capital, but they can take it out. They can withdraw, and it's sort of an evergreen structure, right? So the hedge fund goes on, it just sort of continues indefinitely. People come in and out. That's one model. And then there's the private equity model where, as you exactly said correctly, David, people make a capital commitment. That money is invested over, let's say, 3 or 4 years, and then there's a harvest period of, say, 6 to however many years. And then, money gets distributed, and hopefully people get their money back, and then they get a big return on their capital, right? But then it's over, and the fund is over. And there's been interest from managers and even from investors for there to be a hybrid model where you can commit capital, it's invested over time, kind of in the private equity model, but that you can kind of continue to reinvest it. So it's sort of like a hedge fund where, it goes on indefinitely. And, I've seen in the past, because I do represent a number of institutional investors, so I get to see lots of different kind of fund vehicles and fund documents. This concept of sort of a hybrid between a private equity fund and a hedge fund isn't new. Like, that has existed for a little while. It's very, very complicated economically. Just accounting for the ins and the outs and it's just the plumbing of it and the accounting for it is very, very complicated, but it sort of scratches an itch. Like, private equity advisors like to have a pool of capital that's perpetual so they can continue to make investments. And there are some institutional investors that really do want to lock up their money for a longer period, but they don't want this to be investments in public equities the way like hedge funds usually are. They really do want these to be investments in companies the way like private equity funds and venture capital funds. So I think this is going to be a continuing trend. I think it's an itch that a lot of people have.
Hmm.
And so again, it's incredibly complicated. And I think the best way to do it is to have a really big fund that can sort of bear the kind of the cost of that, the sort of the economy of scale of that. But it's interesting to me that you're aware of that, because it really is a very sophisticated kind of vehicle.
Yeah, and for now, it's only the biggest firm that are offering that. So we're still
Exactly.
see if it's possible for smaller ones to pick it up with the scale that's needed to sustain. Thank
Yep.
you.
Just to understand it, I will tell you, I reviewed one of those funds at one point. The first time I ever reviewed one of those funds for a client that was investing, it took like 5 times as long as it usually does for me to understand the economics. It was so hard to understand. Once I understood it, it made sense, but it's really complicated.
Gotcha. And thank you for the insight again. Uh, the last question we have for the business trend, Mary also asked just now in the chat, is about impact investing, and I guess a broader topic of that is stakeholder capitalism. What's your view on how fund managers should adapt when stakeholder capitalism is now gaining popularity, and is impact investing the future for fund management? What role do you think lawyers should play in this transition from shareholder capitalism only to stakeholder capitalism?
Right. So I will say that impact investing is not the future, it is the present. It is here already. It's huge. I've been working on impact investing and impact funds and impact managers for probably 12 years. So I started working with one of the sort of original wealth advisory firms that was focused on impact ages ago now. And back then they were sort of like, sort of almost like evangelicals, right? Like they were trying to preach the sort of the religion of impact investing. And it was still a new concept that nobody understood. But in the last, I would say 10 years or maybe 5 years, and especially since the pandemic, there's just been this huge growth in interest in from all kinds of investment vehicles to have at least some kind of impact offering. And so what does that mean? It means that people are interested in investing in vehicles, whether it's shares of a company or private investment funds, where their goal is to make money from the investment, but they also want the investment to have some kind of positive social or environmental or kind of governance impact. So like you're saying, stakeholder capitalism, so that the bottom line, the economic bottom line, isn't the only criteria for whether or not an investment is worthwhile to make and whether or not it has been a successful investment. And it's really exciting. I've done a lot of impact work. I just finished writing a chapter for a book for international lawyers about different kinds of ESG, environmental, social, governmental investments. And my chapter was about impact funds. And it's just really exciting. It's not just in the US, around the, in fact, frankly, more in other countries than here. People are really, really interested in doing good with their money. And so it's a really exciting time when even the most managers that used to, every dollar, they're bottom line oriented, every dollar, that's all that counts, have wonderful impact offerings now. And I think more and more investors expect that to be the case.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for that insight again. I guess just last couple minutes, we'll focus on entrepreneurship and career advancement, which are central to many students here on their mind. One of the questions that we get is that there seems to be this notion of path dependency in a career in law. If you choose to become a lawyer, go to law school, you have to go to a law firm, and it's hard to become entrepreneur afterwards, or it's hard to join a startup, except in the capacity, I guess, as a general counsel, have you seen any examples of lawyers who became successful entrepreneur, who got a successful career outside of law in the broader economy, like startups, etc.?
Oh my gosh, yes. Especially here in the Bay Area. I mean, sometimes I feel like we lose half of our corporate associates to startups. um, and not just as yeah, in the legal department, but they often very quickly become just part of the company. And yes, they have the legal expertise, but they're part of the business of the company and the leadership of the company. There's so much, I mean, again, this is part of this. Don't be too married to the path that you've chosen because there's so many alternate paths. So you can start a career in the law and you might have a client that's a startup and you end up going to work with them, or you might have a friend who's doing something that you think is really exciting and you can use your legal skills and business acumen that you developed as a lawyer to help them with their, like, maybe you don't understand the technology that they're developing or the product that they're trying to develop, but you know how to sort of run a business and you know how to keep point and make sure that they don't get in trouble with regulators. There's so many different ways you can get into entrepreneurship. Um, that's one of the wonderful things about entrepreneurship is there's no one, sort of like lane, like you have to be in this lane or you can't be an entrepreneur. It's almost the opposite, right? Like there's a million ways you can get there, and law is one of them.
Absolutely. That's very reassuring to hear. You can always go from law to entrepreneurship. Any advice for entrepreneurs when interacting with lawyers, especially tech entrepreneurs that are very prevalent in the Bay Area?
Yes, two main pieces of advice. Number one, be prepared to explain your technology to your lawyers because most lawyers do not understand technology. And in fact, law firms and law schools are desperate for law students and lawyers who understand technology. So be prepared to explain it. And then number two, on the flip side of that, is really listen and learn, because when you go talk to a sophisticated and experienced lawyer in emerging companies, they've seen everything and they can give you so much guidance, and you should listen to that.
Thank you for that advice. And the very last question of the day, it's a fun question that's almost like a tradition we always ask all of our speakers is, if you can create a vending machine that supplies an unlimited amount of certain product, what product would it be? And where would you put that vending machine?
Oh my God, why didn't you warn me about this? Vending, so people have to pay to get the thing?
Yes, so it'll be somewhere people will pay and they'll get the product.
God, I can't even begin. Okay, I'm looking out my window because I'm sitting here in San Francisco and I'm looking out my window and I'm thinking about all the homeless people, and like, wouldn't it be cool if like there's like a vending machine and you could put money in and then it would like have things that like could go to the homeless, and then the homeless could come and like get whatever it was from the vending machine that they needed because somebody else already put the money in. I
Wow.
don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's not just dispensed, but also store, wait until people who need it to come and pick it up.
Exactly. They could come pick it up. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. That's some fast thinking right there. Like,
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all. It was a pleasure. I wish I could have seen all of your faces, but I'm really, really proud of all of you and excited to see what you all do.
and thank you again, Alan, for coming and then speaking to us. Thank you for all the audience who participated today. And we'll keep in touch, Alan. Thank you so much
Thank
again.
you so much. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.